Elidor by Garner, 2, Cloth of Gold. A cliff rose above him, and at the top were ruins of a castle. He was confused by the noise that had shaken the church, but the cold thrill and burn of the spray woke him. Roland walked along the shore. The cliff was an islet separated from the mainland by a channel of foam. High over his head a drawbridge spanned the gap, and there was no other way to cross. He would have to climb and climb soon, for even as he tried to find the best place to start, a wave dragged at the rocks. The tide was coming in. The rocks sloped on one side and were never more than a hard scramble, but the height was bad. The sound of the water dropped away, and there was no wind. The cliff thrust him outwards, and each moment and each movement felt too violent for him to be able to keep his balance, and the tendons in his wrists were strained by the pressure of his grip on every hold. He knew better than to look down, but once he looked up, and the whole mass of the castle toppled slowly towards him. After that, he forced himself to see only what was within reach of his hand. The foundations of the castle were smooth masonry, curving to the vertical wall. But between the foundations and the bedrock, there was a ledge which Roland worked himself along until he reached the drawbridge. The chains that raised the bridge had been cut, and he was able to use one of them to pull himself up to the level of the gatehouse. The bridge itself was undamaged, but the gatehouse had fallen in. Roland climbed through into the courtyard. There were 4 towers to the castle, one at each corner of the broken walls, and in the middle of the courtyard stood a massive keep. It was high with few windows. "Hello!" Roland called. There was no reply. Roland went through the doorway of the keep into a great hall, cold and dim, and spanned by beams. The floor was strewn with dead roses, and the air heavy with decay. An arch in one corner led to a spiral staircase. Here the light came through slits in the wall, and was so poor that for most of the time Roland had to grope his way in darkness. The first room was an armory lined with racks, which held a few swords, pikes, and shields. It took up the whole width of the keep. Roland drew a sword from one of the racks. The blade was sharp and well greased. And that was another strange thing about the castle. Although it was a ruin, the scars were fresh. The tumbled stone was unweathered, and all the windows held traces of glass. He replaced the sword. It was too heavy to be of use. Roland continued up the stairs to the next door. He opened it and looked into a barren room. Shreds of tapestry hung against the walls like the skeletons of leaves, and there was one high window of 3 lancets, and the glass of the middle lancet was scattered on the floor, and in the hearth opposite the window lay a white plastic football. Roland took the ball between his hands, just as he had pulled it from under the lorry. The pattern of stitches, the smear of oil and brick dust, it was the same. He stared at the ball, and as he stared he heard a man singing. He could not hear the words, but the voice was young, and the tune filled Roland with a yearning that was both pain and gladness in one. Where was it coming from, he thought? The next room up? If only he could hear the words. Whoever was singing, he had to hear. But as he moved, the voice stopped. "No!" whispered Roland. The ball dropped from his fingers, and for a long time he listened to its slow bounce, 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 down and round until that was lost. He must be up there. Roland started to climb. He came to the room above, the last room. For ahead, the curve of the stair grew brighter as it opened onto the top of the keep. There was no one in the room, but under the window stood a low white marble table, draped from one end, as though it had been jerked off, was a tapestry of cloth of gold. Roland went to the table. It was quite plain except for the shape of a sword cut deep in the stone. He picked up the golden tapestry and spread it over the table. It dropped with the folds of long untouched use, and the impression of the sword was in the cloth. And as he stepped back, Roland felt the castle tremble, and the voice drifted to him through the window, far away, but so clear that he caught broken snatches of the words. "Fair is the land for all time, Beneath snow follow flowers. Oh, wait for me, cried Roland. Don't go! A magic land and full of song. He sprang up the steps and on to the battlement of the keep. Green Isle of the shadow of the stars. All around, sea and air mingled to a gray light, and the waves were silver darts in the water. From the drawbridge a road went up toward the hills and into a forest that covered the lower slopes. On the road, moving away from the castle, Roland saw the fiddler. And that's the end of chapter 2.